Hello viewers, my name is Adam.
I'm Aaron.
This is Seeking Media Productions, bring you mini-series reviews.
So we decided that we was going to slip in a whole bunch of series all together at once because there was no use of trying to do separate videos for them, considering that they're not really making those series anymore, at least not right now. And we're talking about the Marvel Netflix series.
So these multiple groups of series debuted way back when the first Marvel Netflix's Daredevil debuted back in 2015. And it was at that time where the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe as you will, was picking up steam as the hype train was kept on pumping out movies and movies and movies.
It has not stopped. They decided they weren't content with just taking over the silver screen. They wanted to take over the small screen and the digital space as well.
And their first official outing at the MCU's television space was Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That was on ABC.
Take it as you will. It was it lasted. They definitely finished it off, and there was a fan base for it, but it wasn't nearly as strong as they were hoping it for it to be.
But as long as that series was going on, that series became more of a MCU adjacent, and which was unfortunately as of right now kind of the same fate as all these series that we're going to discuss. And what made the Marvel Netflix stand out amongst it was it was on Netflix. It was also some of the first early series of Netflix was offering as far as original content wise.
Exactly, and more to the point, they were a lot more adult in their storytelling. That means there were a lot of deaths going on. There was more subjective matter, sex. If you name it, it was pretty much implied or involved.
But it's mainly due to the fact that these heroes that they decided to focus on, these live action adaptation of the Defenders, they wanted to be more grounded into its approach.
Yeah, these were the heroes that were taking care of the business that the Avengers couldn't be bothered or didn't necessarily register too much on their radar. We're talking about low-level thugs, crime bosses, those such people. These were what these heroes were really going to take care of.
And these heroes were they basically span across the series that are known as Marvel's Daredevil. Then it branched into Jessica Jones, which then still had a spinoff for Luke Cage, and then Iron Fist. And for the most part, until they introduced back in season 2 of Daredevil, the Punisher. But after all, one of the goals that they wanted to do was for this series was to have their own little mini Avengers event in the form of the Defenders miniseries.
Yeah. Let's put it this way. Let's just break it down between each of the characters and their own respective shows, and we'll take it from there. Starting out with Daredevil.
So Daredevil, we're gonna say off the bat that this is the highest highlight of all the Marvel Netflix shows.
That is so true.
And the approach for this Daredevil was to be more comics accurate. And the show winds up being a lot more faithful to the source material than anybody would realize, especially in comparison to the other heroes who have their own shows in Marvel Netflix.
I could not get enough of it, and when it finally ended, man, I was wishing they would bring it back and give me more. Thankfully, it looks like Marvel's answered that calling, because we are going to see that that particular character continue. Maybe not necessarily in the same light that he started out with, but definitely he's coming back in some form or fashion.
But those are just rumors at the time of this video.
Exactly.
Charlie Cox was brought in to do the latest live action iteration of Matt Murdock's Daredevil. An actor who proved to be very committed to his role.
He really brought forth that, adrenaline rush that character desperately deserved and needed, but also the faith aspect to him. Everything you wish they could have done right with Daredevil, they delivered.
Like, he had to make sure that he performed himself as being a believable person who is blind, despite the fact that he's not necessarily blind in himself due to his enhancements. You can tell that he worked hard with the choreography as the performer of Daredevil, and he looks good in his costume.
The fights in this series alone were probably some of the best that Marvel had to offer, at least for the small scale screen, and probably more so for a lot of their other outings in general, because
Yeah.
But you felt punches. You felt when people got hurt. It was visceral.
He was welcomed with a great supporting cast of characters of Demerol and Wall, and also introducing the recurring character who sprinkles out through all the series of Rosario Dawson's Claire Temple.
Or Night Nurse.
Yes. Night Nurse, never officially taught, but we
You
all
know
who
dang
she
well
was.
that was who she was. But of course, it would be nothing without the bad guys that character like Daredevil had to go up against. And Kingpin in this variation was chilling and absolute joy to thrill.
He was that ticking time bomb of a man-child who had great
A sophisticated man-child. Like,
which is like
he was complex.
Multiple layers to this iteration of Wilson Fisk. Play like on par on the caliber of acting like Charlie Cox is in the form of Vincent D'Onofrio. But moving on from Daredevil, we also introduced in the series another live action form of Elektra, played by Elodie Young.
I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed her performance. I felt that this was probably just like Daredevil and Matt Murdock, spot on right there. I'm with it. We need more.
Now on to Jessica Jones, is played by Kristen Ritter. Talk about an actress who basically is that character.
Like all day, that was like literally everybody else who was probably on that that you could have possibly thought about playing her, like kicked them out the room. This was all her role all day.
She helped shape it. She is that character. All the sass, all the weight. Clearly, when you walk into her,
she was
role,
so done with everything and everybody.
And like you can tell that there's history in her character.
Yep.
Even before during the pilot, like you can feel that she went through some stuff, and she's done with everything. She just sees through everybody's BS.
But I mean, I guess as brilliant as that portrayal was, and as sucked in with her portrayal and her storyline as you could possibly get, because of the budget constraints of this series, with all these series, but really mostly in hers more than the others, I felt as though there's so much history that you really should have got even more depth with her character, and we just didn't get it.
Like, yeah, she brought along yet one of the other highlights of the Marvel MCUs as far as villains is concerned. Was the Purple Man, played by David Tennant, who brought a very chilling and grounded portrayal of someone who was able to basically the walk-in personification of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Anybody can dream of. Actually, there's a lot of forms of abuse, especially with the character, but he really did brought another sense of reality that not even still the MCU still is able to do.
Yeah, they haven't really touched that
aspect.
Yeah, it's like it's a rawness with what he did.
And Jessica Jones, like she has a supporting cast that they could have really benefited as well for a better budget, because she is like one of the more supposedly one of the more powerful versions of persons in the Defenders group, but unfortunately we can't really see that.
Yeah.
But she was able to bring along Luke Cage and introduce him until he was able to get his own series, and who was played by Mike Coulter.
I love this actor. I love a lot of the things he's in. I mean, he's just brilliant. But what he did with Luke Cage was chef's kiss. I mean, say what you want. I mean, we all adore what Chadwick Boseman brought towards the character of Black Panther. But I suppose, with the other black characters in Marvel, at least the ones that we've seen that was brought to fruition in the MCU, I feel as though what Mike Coulter brought towards Luke Cage was literally on the same pedestal to a lot of those other characters, and honestly deserved a lot more respect.
Like he's a character who brought much wisdom, very like impactful in the community. Like his show is very much a modern day blaxploitation picture, just elongated form. Which kind of like doesn't do well with, like it kind of like plays with the tone a lot.
It does.
Which also like hampers, like kind of hampers his villains a bit because before Mahershala Ali was about to play Blade in the MCU, he was introduced here in Luke Cage
as a villain known as Copperhead.
No, Cottonmouth.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Cottonmouth. I'm sorry.
Cottonmouth, and who was like brilliant when he first debuted. Unfortunately enough, that like a lot of the characters wind up being short lived.
That's a common recurrence throughout all these series, except for another one that's going to really be coming up real soon. And there's reasons for that, but I feel so for at least for Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and Luke Cage.
First season.
The first seasons at least for those for Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, but the complete series for Daredevil. Like, these characters were really something special, and they really had a lot more to offer that the MCU really should have ate up and just absorbed into the fold with the rest of the heroes.
Unfortunately enough, not much can be said about Iron Fist's show.
Yeah, you can throw that one completely away.
Yeah, Finn Jones clearly was. We all knew he wasn't a good enough actor to play the role.
Nope.
And even before he was cast, it was much debate on whether or not, despite the fact that his comic book is accurate, a person who's Caucasian or white character or actor to play this the role of Iron Fist, who in of itself has a lot of Asian heritage to him.
Now, Iron Fist is a very complex character. That was always going to be an issue. And for me personally, and this is me speaking as a individual who's not a part of the Asian community, so I really can't really speak on that particular perspective. But what I can speak on is the concept that martial arts is a subject that is something that is not necessarily just inherent towards one particular culture. It is something that is an art form that's expressed throughout multiple cultures, and having a character who's not is not specifically Asian being their entire thing isn't necessarily so much the issue. The issue is that the way this particular character was written and the way it was portrayed.
Yeah, like he was off base on a lot of his performance from the way it went from the much more talkative scenes. He was overacting.
Oh yeah.
His choreography, you could tell that he didn't do it. It was very sloppy to the point that the better person who could almost carry the show, despite the fact that the show was falling apart, was the character of Colleen Wing, played by Jessica Henwick.
That was the only thing that was like somewhat interesting or at least worthy enough to be said. I might want to look a little bit more into that.
And the mere fact that throughout from Daredevil, Iron Fist, and the main villains of the Defenders miniseries, the Hand, like across the board, it was like there was all over the place in terms of quality. And it's still, and for Iron Fist to be the show that kind of was the linchpin of the Defenders, that the show clearly didn't do any favors to that group of villains.
No, that made me so mad because the Hand is literally something that could have been really something special and really, bring home a lot of those lower villain aspects and even hype them up even further if they was allowed to be folded into the MCU.
Mm-hmm. But outside of all that, the one last part we want to get on to before we want to finish up this video is talk about the Punisher, who was introduced in Daredevil season 2.
I really enjoyed the Punisher. I thought he was really cool.
Yeah, John Bernthal, he basically embodies the grounded gruffness with a soul that Frank Castle.
He was born to play that role.
He was also my choice to play Wolverine.
Could have also done that. I still feel as though he might still be able to do it if you don't necessarily bring him back for for a Punisher in his series. But we're not gonna say anything about that.
Yeah, and his show took his character in the show drew out caught a lot of people off by surprise because his show wound up being more of a character piece than it was like a hard-on action picture.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that they did decide to go head on that mentality, that psychological aspect of his him being a veteran.
Exactly.
The loss of his family.
Mm-hmm. If anything, Punisher more so than any other character is a complete and true representation of the vigilante, the guy that goes out there and takes the law into their own hands. And that's definitely a hard road to necessarily struggle and balance, because you can really go into territories that can be really considered as being what's the word that could really justify it, or at least sum it up. I would probably say irresponsible, because you're talking about a character that literally desires to wipe out evil by stamping out himself, by literally cutting the cord right then and there and taking lives.
And who was a good adversary for Daredevil when he was debuted, because they did have that type of clash of ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
But to finish things off, let's discuss the real reason why a lot of the MCU, the Marvel Netflix shows fell apart, which is production.
Mm-hmm.
Across the board, they did say off the bat that they wanted more grounded stories,
and that's fine. That's beautiful. A lot of these characters deserve more grounded stories, considering they're dealing with the everyday criminals and lives and tribulations that attributes living in big city environments.
Unfortunate enough, you're still because you still said that this was the part of the MCU.
Your superhero stories.
You still require a budget, and throughout the shows, like, you can clearly tell that they couldn't do the more fantastical elements. So the characters like Iron Fist, he suffered greatly because of this. Not just because of the poor choreography, but the fact that he is a special effects out of all the characters. Him and Jessica Jones, they require a lot of special effects to work.
Exactly.
Daredevil, he had basically more of the most consistent quality in terms of all throughout his seasons.
But when you can't even do his sensory abilities the way that you really should have, there's also issues on that front as well.
Mm-hmm. And Luke Cage, who his most definitive aspect, his trait, him being a bulletproof man with super strength as an after effect, like, he was portrayed overall well. It's just that, unfortunate enough, and because they focus so much on making sure that he stands out, his villains, at the end of the day, they fell flat because, really.
And let's be honest, when you think about Luke Cage and Iron Fist, these are two characters that should never have been really separated that much in the beginning, because these are characters that are very much tied together within themselves, as in their own comics, and should have been tied together even further in these shows.
Unfortunately enough, by midway through, you can tell that from the revolving doors of showrunners, there wasn't much of a solid, concrete way in which they can be more consistent with it. Mm-hmm. Going back again with Daredevil, him having more of the consistent production schedule. Like, his fight action scenes were up to par, despite the fact that been more along. Like, in the earlier seasons, they did have an issue with lighting. Thankfully enough, in season 3, they were able to end off with a bang, especially doing a lot more comic accurate fight scenes when they introduced the character who would have been Bullseye.
Man, I was so enthralled with Poindexter. I wish they would have done more with him if they had continued into a season, into the next season. But with the little that we did get with him in that season, in the very last season, I was geeked up. I was really hyped.
And is why that low budget and the inconsistency of showrunners that overall we won't want to say that because overall it's not bad, but obviously
it could have been a lot better.
Yes, because other than Daredevil, each show progressively got worse, kind of way. They declined in quality in varying degrees as they went along. So because of the because we want to say they want to recommend Daredevil as the highest recommendation, we're separating that as the sole great series of the Marvel Netflix. Mm-hmm. But overall, they're okay.
guys, that's it. If you like this review, please like, share, and subscribe. Please hit that little bell down there at the bottom for notifications. We want to hear from you. Did you watch any of these shows? Which one was your favorite? Are you interested in seeing these characters brought back into the fold of the MCU? Let us know.
My highlights, I want to bring back Charlie Cox, Daredevil.
Oh, this is like almost
Gabriel.
Everything in Daredevil needs to be brought into the MCU.
Jessica Jones, and I want to do a quick shout out to Simone Missick, who portrayed Misty Knight in Luke Cage.
Please bring her. Please, I need her.
So she was basically like the second lead in that show.
She really was.
And before Riri Williams comes into play as a lead like black actress, like Misty Knight, she was that person.
Yep.
But there you go. See you.